that give you interesting insights on the environment in which hate crime takes place in the European Union and the potential of integration in European societies, I would say also in the sense of discussion this morning in Western democracies. And maybe add to the discussion we had. I have a personal temptation to participate to this extensive discussion, but I'm going to stick to the data for the time being. So this chart, I'm going to present a lot of charts. If you're bored or if anyone is asleep, you can tell me. I can change the pace of the presentation. I'm told that I have plenty of time, so I prepared about 40 slides. This chart actually makes the point of the situation. This is more or less the same, not just for migrants, but also for other groups. Almost 90%, 9 on 10 victims of hate crime, in this case of harassment, hate-motivated harassment, do not report this to the authorities. This is what a recent EU MIDES survey, a major survey in the European Union on victimization and discrimination against migrants and minorities, has shown. 10% does report this, and we'll see later what this means. The next chart is about harassment of different ethnic groups in the European Union. This is, as I said, a most recent survey of about 27,000 respondents in 28 member states. It's a large survey sample. And it has been the second wave of the EU MIDES survey. The first one has taken place in 2008. This has taken place in 2016. And it is the first time that we also included in this victimization survey integration and participation questions that are very interesting, as we will see very soon. Now, this chart shows what it has been discussed a bit this morning. This is about harassment. It's not about violent attacks. It's not about hate crime. It can be hate speech. It can be harassment on the street. This is the precursor of violence. This is the situation in the European Union, and as we can see, some groups do suffer this much. Let's put it simply, sub-Saharan Africans in Finland have a 50% probability to be victims of harassment in a year. And other groups, same group as sub-Saharan Africans in Ireland, Luxembourg, Germany and Denmark have a rather high percent, Turks in Netherlands, Austria, North Africans in Netherlands, Belgium, Italy, and France, and so on. My presentation will be available to you. I'm just going to present you some key data. This is even worse for migrants or people of migrant background. Parentheses, we interviewed immigrants and EU citizens of migrant background. This is even harsher for those that do wear religious clothing, and harsher for women, slightly more acute, this phenomenon of harassment. And as I said, the last year before the survey, this is an overall average for Muslim respondents. No, this is an overall average for Muslim respondents in a year time of victimization. Now, this chart shows the different ethnic groups and their experience with stops by police. There are some groups, some ethnic groups, that have suffered, that they claim that they have suffered ethnic profiling, so they have been stopped because of their ethnic background. And this is most prominent for Southeastern Asia, mainly Pakistanis in Greece and Cyprus, and sub-Saharan Africans in Germany, France, and Italy. This is again in the full sample of Muslim respondents in the EU MIDES. Now, about the contact with the police. One of the problems we know that it is about concerns the trust of the victims to the police. So the victims of hate crime incidents that were Muslim respondents in the survey have expressed their dissatisfaction, about 81%, after concerning the way the police has handled the most recent incidents. This is the pie concerning, this is the chart concerning those that have reported. This is about the 10% more or less that reports to the police. And 81% were dissatisfied by the treatment of the police. Now, talking about hate-motivated violence, and this is a chart concerning all respondents of the EU MIDAS, so all people of migrant background in the European Union. These are the groups that have suffered in the year before the survey physical violence. They have been victimized. Now, these percentages may not seem very high to some, but there are, because actually it is it's a 10% probability that in a year you can be a victim of violence. So this is about violent attacks. We're not talking about harassment or hate crime like hate speech or threats. We're talking about physical violence. And mainly they are sub-Saharan Africans in Austria, Roma also, because Roma has been also part of this survey. And as you realize, the group that is more frequently victimized in the European Union, according to this chart, are sub-Saharan Africans. So Europeans, black Europeans, or people of African descent, and followed by other groups, as you see on the chart. Now, this is the most interesting chart for this discussion, why people do not report hate crime. The major reason is that people do not think that anything would happen. They don't feel that reporting it would make any difference. Nothing would happen or change, they say. Less, but still 21% say that they dealt with the problem by themselves or with help from family and friends. This is shows the importance, tells us about the importance of social networks, informal networks, but also the side effect of this phenomenon. If people cannot rely on the authorities, but they do rely, they cling only to their formal networks, especially when we talk about segregated or ghettoized populations, this can be a real problem and difficult situation for integration and social cohesion. Let's say that the incident was minor, didn't worth reporting, because it happens all the time. This is normalizing of the incident by the victims themselves, because the context is such that victims tend to normalize what happens to their daily life in a rather frequent, on a rather frequent basis. It would have been too bureaucratic, time-consuming. Sorry, I'm reading this chart because it is also related to the findings and the recommendations. I was afraid of intimidation, they say, from perpetrators. And they don't trust the police. 10% of the victims. They were concerned that no one would take them seriously, or somebody stopped me or discouraged me. This is our other members of the group. Eventually they say, why should you go and report it? So it's about multiplying the effect of people not trusting the police or the authorities within the community. Only 5% said they didn't know where to go. I stress that because I will see later the major factor that professionals think is that people lack awareness, they don't know where to report. This result, this finding denies this assumption. And only 1% I wouldn't report it because I have residence permit problems, so therefore if I would go to the police, this would create a problem with my migrant resident status. Now, we conduct also a research, qualitative research, with interviews to experts. As you see, these are the major factors that, according to experts, discourage victims to report hate crime. 87% victims suffer from feelings of fear, guilt, or shame. We didn't see anything about shame in the previous chart. Victims believe that they would not benefit from proceedings, correct. But this tells us something for the police handling of the issue, but also the judiciary outcome. And I will return to this in a moment. 77%, still high, as I said before, victims lack awareness of their rights and of support services available to them. We didn't see this as a problem for victims to report to the police. 75% do not trust the police, they nailed that. And 65%, they believe it's too bureaucratic, costly, or time-consuming, because actors may know very well from inside that it's indeed very bureaucratic. And 6% victims believe that the offense was not so serious, and 6% that there are not targeted support services available. Now, the next chart is about what could be done according to professional groups that deal with victims, within the same research ensuring justice to hate crime victims. So 89%, the major factor, they say, raising victims' awareness of the rights and available support services. So there is a contradiction there, as we said before. 81% enhance the trust of the police. How? Through training, through other means. There were many things suggested, but that we discussed for long years now in the European Union. 75% tackle discriminatory practice within the police. So obviously this is considered to be a major reason it has to be tackled. Set up specialized units, enable online hate crime reporting, which is not the case in most member states. Where this is available, it's very successful, for example in the UK. And police and courts taking hate crime more seriously. So the professional groups themselves this tells us that maybe this is not always taken very seriously, or not really confronted by the authorities in a proper manner. So this next chart shows an insight on the Muslim respondents survey, part of the survey, that the overwhelming majority of perpetrators were of a different ethnic background. And the majority, 65%, if I'm not mistaken, of no ethnic background, so nationals of the country. This tells us that this is a clear inter-ethnic crime. Nevertheless, the EU-MIDAS survey has shown that despite victimization and discrimination, the overwhelming majority of migrants or people of migrant background in the European Union do feel integrated. They feel strongly attached on a scale of 5 to the countries they are residents. They feel members of the society. This is more prominent for some groups and less for others. For example, we saw before that Sub-Saharan Africans do suffer a lot of harassment, 47% in Finland, but they do feel strongly attached to the country they live in. So we see there a potential of integration in society where policies can build on, especially regarding what was mentioned before very insightfully and correctly. There is a need to increase meaningful social interaction between in societies that want to thrive through diversity. In the same time, we have also identified some eye-openers results about attitudes, about openness of migrants. These are comfort scale questions. It's about, these are results that demolish myths and stereotypes against migrants, especially those that are Muslim migrants. These are results for Muslim response to the European Union MIDAS survey. In fact, the overwhelming majority has shown that, told us that they feel extremely comfortable, 9 on a scale of 10, 9, of living together next door with a person of different religion, different ethnic background, sexual orientation, or gender identity. You can compare this to results that you would have from a majority population. So, demolishing the myth and the stereotype against Muslim migrants. By this, I want to stress something that was mentioned before, and I want to say this in the discussion. Someone said it, I don't remember. Stereotypes are things that people grab from. Stereotypes, which prejudice, is something that people use to live. For example, if you go down the stairs, you have a stereotype that this stair is the same as the other. If not, you would fall, or you take some 30 minutes to descend the stairs. So they can be useful. That's why people build stereotypes. We should not blame stereotypes themselves. We should just make the people understand which are the best stereotypes. One could have, for example, I have, because of personal experience repeatedly in the last decades of my life, that Muslims are great people, because I know many of them, but that's also prejudice. I'm saying it's a generalization. I'm just saying that there are positive things on that, not just to blame the side that is maybe misoriented or misperceives reality. And Muslim respondents in this chart indicate that they do trust the police, they do trust public institutions even more than majority respondents in the same Eurobarometer survey. So despite victimization, despite stereotypes, despite intolerance, Muslim respondents in the EU-Mali survey have shown that they do trust in the majority of the police and the public institutions, even more than natives. But when they're victimized, discriminated, or harassed, this trust diminishes, decreases. This is a comparison. The blue circles are those that have not suffered an incident. The red circles are those that they have suffered an incident. They still trust the police, but less than others. And we have also worked on attitudes of violence. On this chart, which I'm not going to elaborate more because we need to elaborate on this. This is more in depth. You can see that Muslim respondents in the EU-Mali survey, in their overwhelming majority, 80%, more than that, they deny, they think that violence, even if a person offends your religion, is never acceptable. Of course, there is a 10%, but we can go there and work on it. By this, I want to say that we need to build on the positive potential of migrants, and we need to use these results to create, let's say, effective mechanism to tackle hate crime by, for example, recruiting migrants, people with migrant background in public sector, especially in key sectors like police, judiciary, and education systems. In fact, one thing that we discussed en passant this morning was about education. One could claim and could say that education is a model in the European Union and in the Western democracies that was built on the needs of past centuries and not really tackling the current needs and the current challenges that young people face. So, how much time do I have left? I'm over it. I knew that. No, my presentation will be available. I just want to say that we did also some other work like that. We tried to collect the case law, the national case law, even at district level, local level, concerning hate crime against Muslims, against migrants in the EU. And the results are really interesting because this is where things happen on the ground, where the courts implement decisions. For example, this morning we're discussing about hate speech and how to tackle it. One thing is to limit the freedom of speech, which would be like shooting ourselves on the foot, talking about democracies. On the other hand, when hate speech is connected to crime, it has to be assessed by a court. It has to be assessed in the proper manner. If not, we are going to witch hunt, and so on. And so we try to contribute to that, and to try to raise awareness and to help people, for example, by providing exact address, exact locations of victim support services. This is not yet public. I'm presenting to you. Maybe it's going to be at some point later in the year. And we have submitted a number of opinions to the policymakers in the European Union on how to increase our capacity in reporting and recording hate crime by improving training of the police officers, by improving operational tools, reporting mechanisms, online tools, by developing civil partnership and the civil society organization. Where this happened has had a groundbreaking effect. We heard before about UK, we mentioned Greece, which has been a country with terrible problems also in the administration. When there was a network that cooperated with the police, things completely happened, completely changed. When there was Golden Dawn going in court, the hate crime declined spectacularly, and so on. Recruiting, as I said, police officers of migrant background or educators, and so on, and develop and promote participation and voice of people of migrant background, especially young people, the mixed generation of young people of different ethnic backgrounds is going to give the response to this question. By this, I want to say that the social media is an incredibly interesting issue that I think is the issue on which we don't have the answers yet. Also in FRA we have developed, I didn't expect this to be discussed here, we have developed a paper on how to communicate rights more effectively through social media. It's on our website, please dig it. It is a big question. As it was mentioned before, it can be considered as public safety, national security issue, not just about a freedom of speech issue or about a soft issue on how to use the internet. It can be something really harder, and Christine is really starting to look at me very angry now, so stop.
Thank you very much, Miltos. That was incredibly